It's hard to believe that before 1970 there really was no computerized information. Somehow we managed to run businesses and run our enterprises without the benefit of having computer-based data assets. The ability of the computing device to marry itself to information really occurred about 1970. And from 1970 to 1993, the model was pretty much the same. The world was dominated by data compilers. They would go out in the marketplace and identify a need. They'd collect the data once and then sell it many times to marketers and supply chain managers and risk managers and so forth. That spawned an ecosystem of compilers. There's about 35 or so that dominate the industry and have done so since 1970. And this data has been the cornerstone of how modeling and decisioning is done in companies using external information. The compiled model has fundamental limitations. That's not to say it isn't useful, but when you think about it, if you're going to collect data once and sell it to many, by its very nature, it has to be static. If the core data changes every 15 seconds, you can't collect it once and sell it to many. So all of us have grown accustomed to using this old, tired, static data. SIC code, employment size, corporate affiliations. These are all things that don't change minute by minute. And we've managed for 45 years to use this data, do the best we can with modeling techniques to identify sales and marketing opportunity. So if you look across the business-to-business landscape, you'll see that these few data elements have really been the core of how we try to predict everything. You roll the clock forward, I mentioned 1993. 1993 is a watershed year for us in terms of how we see data, how we can collect data, and how we use it. Why? April of 1993, the first browser was shipped. Now, the first browser is not much of an internet, but by 1996, there was a reasonable pool of internet usage. And those of us who kind of study this data problem realized that by 1996, the data world was going to change. Because the way the internet works, there are signals available at our discretion. We no longer have to say who's going to buy technology products because of their SIC and employment. We can look at who's going to buy technology products because we can see them shopping for technology products through signals that are available through the internet. The internet is a relatively open system, and the data that flows through it is monumental. To give you an idea, today, if you bought all the compiled data from everybody in the world that sells it, there's about 5 billion gigabytes of data you can buy. In the internet today, there's about 25 billion gigabytes a day that are captured and stored and available for use. By the way, most of this data has been collected in the last 2 years, so it's not surprising that companies today really don't have the programs in place to take full advantage of this new sea of data. Rather than being static, the data is very dynamic. Today we call that signals and triggers. The compiled world is mostly focused around the US because for that 45-year period, the companies who used compiled data were heavily US-centric. It's no longer the case. Companies around the world do decisioning based on data. The new data tends to be global in its nature. So there is an enormous advantage and an imperative for companies around the world to really understand the nature of big data, how to access it, how to structure it, and how to allow the data to drive its decisioning systems, and maybe most important, when the insights become apparent, how to make sure those insights are used by the corporation effectively.